the way you know that Mercury, a company that has a great product and lots of funding and is backed by great investors, the way you know Mercury is still a startup is that you don't have 3 microphones.
Max just rubbing it in. We've never needed 3 microphones, okay? This is the first time we're doing this event.
We're a 3 microphone company now.
Yeah, we've really scaled. Series D. Yeah, Series D, exactly. Welcome to Founders in Arms. It's me, Immad Akhund, co-founder and CEO of Mercury.
And I'm Suri, co-founder of Lima and Tribe. And today we have our first ever live Founders in Arms event. We have a special guest, Max Mullen. Very excited to welcome to the show.
Hello, happy to be here.
And I just want to start off by, Immad, I don't know if you know, it's been 3 years now we've been doing this podcast. And it's kind of hard to, crazy, right? Time flies, right? And it's been super fun for me and getting a chance to meet new founders every week, having really good conversations with them about what they're really passionate about. As founders, we're always inspired by each other. And we're going through lots of ups and downs constantly. We're in our own worlds. But, nothing can help. Someone was telling me right now the biggest moat for a founder is their pain tolerance. And, we all know that's true, right? We all know that that's a big part of the journey. And that inspiration is sometimes what gets you through, right? It's like you learn from others, you learn about what they've overcome, and you're like, hey, maybe I can do that too. And so for me, there's nothing as energizing as being in a room full of founders. This is truly, my tribe and our tribe, right? This is truly the group of people that we want to hang out with and talk with. So it's a great occasion just to get everyone together and do our first event. And if it goes well, we'll do more. And hope. I know some of you are new to the show. I talked to a bunch of you before, and hope you guys, enjoy some of the conversations that we have on the show. And yeah, let us know your feedback as well. We're trying to make this for you. I mean, Immad and I actually, we don't monetize the show at all. There's no ads. We just doing this to help and give it back and have some great conversations. So for us, it's about building community. It's about helping others. So hopefully it can be a shared conversation. You guys can tell us what you want to see as well.
Raj said it very well, but it's really fun to see people here. All 3 of us are multi-time founders and investors, and we do it to kind of pay back to the community and also just like have really interesting conversations. I guess I should introduce Max now. Max Mullen is a good friend of mine. He invested in Mercury right at the start. He was like sitting behind me at a Y Combinator alumni demo day, and he was like, "What are you working on?" I think he already knew what I was working on. He just wanted to get in on the round. So that's real hustle. Max is the co-founder and CPO. Is that still your title there?
Co-founder.
Okay. For a long time, he was the chief product officer at Instacart, and he's an active investor. He actually runs a kind of co-working founder space as well here in the city. Welcome to the show, Max.
Thank you so much for having me. And I don't know if you can see, but we're in this beautiful Mercury office here in downtown San Francisco. And the way you know that Mercury, a company that has a great product and lots of funding and is backed by great investors, the way you know Mercury is still a startup is that you don't have 3 microphones.
Max just rubbing it in. We've never needed 3 microphones, okay? This is the first time we're doing this event.
We're a 3 microphone company now.
Yeah, we've really scaled. Series D. Yeah, Series D, exactly. All right, maybe we should just kick off here. Max, tell us how you became a founder. Was Instacart your first company? Tell us a bit of that story.
Yeah. So I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I was in the startup scene there, sort of around the time when I was graduating college, and I always knew I wanted to start technology companies and be around startups, but I didn't know that much about them. And so my first foray into startups was doing like hackathons. And I joined an event called Startup Weekend, which was in LA, kind of like the biggest startup event happening around then. This was in like 2010. And at that event, I won the event, won the weekend, and met my co-founder and started a company out of the idea that we worked on first at that event. So that was my first company.
What was the company?
It's a social network, Raj, where you could. It was sort of a group messaging oriented social startup which is why I know a little bit about group messaging from our chats. And you and your friends could figure out what to do in the real world. And is obviously before LLMs and really AI, but one of the key ideas was in your conversation as you were talking about what you wanted to plan, the software would recommend things like, okay, you're talking about a movie, here are the movie tickets tonight. Or you want to go to a restaurant, here are the places that have reservations. So we had some very interesting ideas, but like startups are hard, and we'll get into that. And it ultimately wasn't super successful, and we sort of were acqui-hired after about a year.
And then how did Instacart get started? What was the journey between the acqui-hire and then?
So we were acqui-hired by a company based here in the Bay Area, and that helped me and my co-founder Daniel move up here. And we worked for that company that acquired our startup as, individual contributors, as me as a product person, which is my background, and him as an engineer. And we learned a lot at that company, but ultimately working for somebody else, it just didn't feel right. And so after, only a few months of working there, we really started thinking, what do we want to do next? And through that process, I came up with lots of ideas and talked to a lot of people, and personally landed on the idea that I wanted to do something kind of the opposite of a social network, something in the real world that was operationally complex, that really helped people with a real important problem. Didn't want to end up solving a cool but not important problem.
So a real 180, right? Like before you were like, no, physical problems are much harder.
Yeah, I was just following what I was interested in my passion areas, and that led me to kind of a sort of spark of inspiration for the idea that sort of became Instacart, and that led me to tell all my smartest friends about that idea, and through telling them, I met someone who ended up becoming my co-founder, Apurva, and the person that introduced us ended up becoming my other co-founder, Brandon. So very serendipitously, sort of in 2012, we started the company after having not really known each other that long.
It was very controversial in the beginning, as I remember, right? Everyone said this idea was dead, Webvan had failed. Did you feel a lot of that, like pressure?
Yeah, Instacart in 2012, you have to remember, was only a few years after the App Store started. So there was no Uber X, there was no DoorDash, there was no gig economy or on-demand behavior amongst consumers. And so then we showed up and said, we're going to do this crazy thing, which is put a grocery store in everybody's pocket and deliver melting ice cream in under an hour. And it seemed impossible, and it was impossible, but we, of course, pitched our hearts out. And most people didn't believe in it. But if you really thought from first principles, what you would understand is that the ones that failed so many years earlier when the internet was less mature and we didn't have mobile. And now trying to do this again, but with more people on the internet, less friction in e-commerce, the whole sort of app revolution would actually make it more possible to build it and scale it and make money doing it.
Yeah, there's this famous story about like Gary Tan received like some beer via Instacart. Like this is after you got rejected from Y Combinator. Like were you guys desperate at that point? Like you hadn't raised money and you really needed to get into Y Combinator. Like what's like the backstory just before that happened?
We were just a very young, small company, and my co-founder sort of was very ambitious and really wanted to impress Gary. And so he sort of said, well, maybe if he sees the value of our product firsthand, he'll understand, right? It wasn't that we got rejected. It was that YC's application deadline had already passed. And so they weren't looking.
Oh, not really?
Yeah, they weren't looking at new applications. So it was late, a little bit late into the batch. And sort of as the story goes, Gary saw the service, brought us into YC. And then you may remember this, but we published a blog post after demo day or around demo day to kind of create hype for ourselves on TechCrunch called How We Hacked YC about this story. And that's why everyone knows the story. And then YC got really mad because they were like, now you're telling everyone.
Everyone's going to show up.
Everyone's going to try to apply late and be mad if we don't accept them. And to credit Gary, who you know now runs YC completely, he took full responsibility because we had sort of run the idea of doing the blog post by him. He took full responsibility. And so other partners of YC were really mad, but then like, Gary jumped in and saved us. And I sort of feel forever indebted to Gary for many things, but particularly for that, because we thought when that was happening, we thought YC was going to hate us and like we were dead.
Yeah. So after you launched this, was this kind of instantly successful, or was there like a kind of a period where it didn't really click and you had to kind of do something to figure it out?
It's an interesting category because the demand for getting your groceries delivered is, of course, always there. People love that. But the question is all the other things like operations and profitability and scaling, and could we do it in cities other than like San Francisco and New York? Like, was this a product that people are going to use in the Midwest? Was it a product that would scale from urban areas to suburban areas and suburb? So at first there was good pull from like other founders in San Francisco, but it was very unclear, would it be mega successful over the really long term?
How many people here use Instacart? Just curious. Everyone, right?
That's like half. I would like to see it a bit more. How many of you use Mercury? Wow, way more. Good for you. By the way, I use Mercury. It's both personally and as an investor, and it's an incredible product. I have a little bit of product feedback for you, but incredible product. Do it live.
What's your biggest product feedback?
Sometimes when I use the invoice bill paying thing.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes if I send an invoice that has other invoices within it, like it's one per.
It doesn't split them out.
I
think you've given me this feedback.
And it might pick the wrong business to say that the invoice is from like Uber.
Oh,
They'll say Uber $4, but the invoice is for $20.
But who the hell merges invoices and then puts them?
General contractors, general contractors, anybody who wants to be reimbursed for something.
I see.
So it happens to me all the time.
Well, anyway, moving on.
Otherwise, I mean, incredible product, which I actually use every day. And I am not just saying that because I'm an investor. You guys have built something very special.
Thank you, Max.
The reason I asked that question was I want to know, every, journey has these key product unlocks, throughout that journey that are discontinuous in terms of growth. I wonder if you might want to share any of those that, because we've all been through that where we're like, oh, we just figured this one thing out and then, growth really grew.
The very first thing we figured out was very early in the company. We got very lucky. We did not understand how important people's favorite retailer was to them. I think we made a base assumption that pretty much many retailers sold the same products, and you as a consumer would just kind of go to whatever retailer we worked with. And we ran an experiment where we added the catalog of a certain retailer that was very popular. And kind of overnight, we started to grow very fast. And we realized that people are very passionate and loyal to their retailers. And with that insight, we sort of became a marketplace. And then we realized, okay, we can now get all the favorite. This is a scalable strategy. We'll go get the catalog of all the retailers we possibly can in an area. And now when you log on to Instacart, there's like 12 stores instead of 1 store or 0 stores, just no store. So that marketplace insight, sort of in the first year of the company, I think was really, really critical.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can see that. I mean, you really have the full menu of all the different stuff. And even now, if you search for a product, you can choose to buy it from different stores, right? You don't kind of force a store. And so over the course of Instacart, as you became a mature company and you had significant revenue, how was your role changed? What kind of roles did you take on? Because you're a co-founder doing different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the first few years of a company, everybody's running around doing everything, and there's less structure and management, and being a generalist is really valuable. And then in the later years of a company, you're bigger, you actually need a lot more specialists. And so as a founder, I've kind of moved around a lot and tried to plug myself in to the projects that are most high leverage that, that are in my wheelhouse that maybe nobody else in the company was owning. So that sort of the constant is a lot of change. And also, in the later years, I sort of focused on culture, which is something that's hard for a non-founder to own. And then other special projects, M&A, building a good relationship between Instacart and different startups and other small companies. And I also worked on our IPO and the sort of internal workings of becoming a public company.
Wow, that's very different stuff, right? Like I know because the last part is like really operational, right? Like it's like you have to hit your deadlines for filing and stuff like that, right?
And also you have to transform as a company from one that kind of has the luxury of being able to change its goals whenever it wants to one that has a very regimented operating cadence and can never miss its goals.
When you went through kind of the going public process and IPO process, is there things that you tried to do that were different? Like, I assume the investment bankers are like, this is the thing, and you follow this. Is there things you did that you're like, hey, we don't want to do that, we'll do it differently?
I think the timing with which we were considering going public was sort of, around 2021 to 2023, and we ultimately went public in 2023. And it wasn't an extremely good market for IPOs. And so we didn't have the luxury of being able to do a lot of innovation. We did not attempt to do a direct listing or anything like that. We just sort of followed the typical playbook for going public as a tech company. We did do one thing kind of different, which I thought was great. The CEO then, Fiji, had been at Facebook when they went public, and rather than go to New York, like you send a contingent of people to New York and they stand on a balcony and ring the bell. That's actually NASDAQ. That's actually NYSE, and we went public on the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ is the button, right? So rather than go to New York and push the button together, we actually brought the button to our office, and they made a special NASDAQ button in the shape of a carrot.
Oh, nice.
That opened the market that day that we went public. And so bringing the whole party to our office and being able to include all of our local employees in that was very different and super special. So one of the benefits of going public in a sort of a difficult IPO window is like you can get special deals like that with the market.
You get the carrot button. Let's talk about culture a bit. How do you think about constructing a culture? I think one thing that I never understood in my previous companies that hopefully we do better at Mercury. There's a couple of Mercury employees here, so hopefully they'll agree with me. Is like we were much more deliberate about culture. What did you do early on, like when less than 10 people that like really helped define the culture as you scaled?
We were pretty thoughtful about culture too, because again, it was our second companies, all of us, and writing down our values was a big important one. But not just writing them down, but also operationalizing the values, making sure that when we hired people, we told them about the values and thought to ourselves, is this a person that wants to live this value system that we practice?
What was your least obvious value?
I'll tell you the answer from our second set of values. So our first set of values was actually, I think, just okay. Yeah. Our second set of values started to become really unique, and we had a value called we have a value still actually called "Go Far Together," which talks about teamwork, and it came from really talking to the team. But basically, at many big companies, you have people that are passionate about what they're doing, but go out of their way to take credit for what they're doing. And we sort of had this play for the front of the jersey attitude. Like all of us are part of the same team, and you have to have a little bit of humility and realize that nothing you do at the company is just a solo accomplishment, right? So there's this teamwork and humility aspect of that value, go far together. And then we also sort of pair it by saying the company, when it needs to do the most ambitious things, you really have to rally as a whole team working together and have each other's backs. And so that feeling of your colleagues having your back and doing big important things as a team and then celebrating them, that go far together spirit, I think is kind of one of the more unique values that we have, and we still have that value today.
Nice. Yeah, we have a value that's similar. I can't remember the exact phrasing, which is bad, but it's like something like be humble / lead with humility kind of thing. And I think actually that's a really important value at scale, because you do get a lot of people that are more, self-centered and egotistical, and that can really screw things up, especially if they're in leadership positions.
And you have to remember, people come from another company, and that other company has values. And if it's a good company, they've operationalized their values. And so you kind of sometimes need to untrain people that this is not the way things work here. The way things work here are that we are really transparent. We have a value called put it all on the table, which is about building trust through transparency. And that is not the average way that every company operates, by being super transparent, even when it's uncomfortable to be transparent. So, by teaching people your values, you kind of help them as new employees kind of get used to working at the company.
How do you fully inculcate a new employee into a value system? What was kind of the brainwashing you did?
The big what?
Brainwashing.
The brainwashing. By the way, someone's studied on culture when they use the word inculcate. That was the first time I heard it as well from my co-founder, who had read some book and they said inculcate. I had to look it up. But how do you operationalize culture? How do you make sure people understand it and make it work at scale? And I have a framework, that I use for this called PARE, P-A-R-E. Stands for people, ambitions, rewards, and environment. And there's a lot of things you need to do to operationalize culture. So obviously it starts with the people and them understanding the values and living them at work. And it's not just the values you say you have, but it's the way you walk the walk. Like, how does leadership behave? Do they follow that value? And it's more about behavior than it is about, words. And then ambitions, like, how do you articulate your mission as a company? Do you weave that into everything that you do? Does everybody's goals actually ladder up to the thing you say you're doing as your mission? Rewards, like, do the people that live these values get promoted? Do you recognize people against the values and hold them up as examples of doing a great job? And then environment, which is kind of the dark horse of this framework, because people don't think that much about environment. But the way you work, the tools you get, the office, the retreats you have, and where they're located and how nice they are or not nice they are, all these things are signals to employees on how to behave. And if you say you're a really resourceful culture and you're going to roll up your sleeves, and then you spend a lot of money on fancy parties and don't talk about your values, then you're not really living your values. So environment plays a big factor as well and it played a much bigger factor when we were pre-COVID and everyone was in person every day. It's harder to build culture through environment over Zoom, but it's, possible.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Never heard of that framework. It's
I invented that framework.
Oh, okay, there we go. That's really cool. So pivoting to some of the work you did on the M&A side. So what was your goal when you're running M&A for Instacart? What were you looking out to accomplish for the company?
I don't think I'm a great expert in M&A, but I've done a little bit of work on it over the years. And when you're looking at buying a company, I think there's usually one of two reasons. Either you think the talent is incredible and would improve your chances of making something successful, and isn't talent you could acquire another way. You couldn't hire this type of person. A lot of times you hear about acquisitions that are done basically because the founder or someone on the leadership team is just so incredible that they bought the whole company just to have that person. And that is very often the case. In fact, I know of a couple of recent really big acquisitions done by really successful late stage private companies that are basically just talent acquisitions, but they paid tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for the company to get that person or those people. And then the second type of acquisition is about buying the business and the customers and the brand. And we've done a little bit of both over the years. Some really successful talent acquisitions or acqui-hires, and also some really successful business acquisitions. I'll give you an example of one of those that kind of is on both sides of the coin for me. I met a YC company also at Demo Day around the same time called QHop. And they were, building technology for retail stores. And about 6 months later, they called me back up and they said, hey, we pivoted. Now we're building a smart grocery shopping cart and we want to partner with Instacart. And I said, of course, I'll introduce you to the right people at Instacart, but also I want to talk to you because I loved you. I thought you were a great team. I didn't like the idea you were working on before, but I love this idea. And that company changed its name and was called Caper. So I invested in this company and I helped them, and they raised an amazing seed round from first round, and they raised a Series A from Lux. And then when they went out to raise their Series B, they were now at a bigger scale, and we acquired them. Instacart acquired them in 2021 for few $100 million. So, so it sort of closed the loop for me, and I was like very proud to have helped this company, and also very proud to then welcome them to Instacart officially. And then and that product, the Caper Cart, is now doing incredibly well. It's at a big scale. And if you go to many grocery stores, not so many in the Bay Area, but many on the East Coast, we've got tons of these incredible smart shopping carts deployed, and people are using them. And it's definitely a big part of the future of sort of the in-store experience at grocery stores.
I think one thing that's like hard for founders is when they think about acquisition, they don't really know how to get acquired. Obviously, getting someone to invest and then buy you is like one way to do it. How do you think about like advising founders on like if they want to sell, like, you know, what is there like a playbook? You know, how do you sell a company?
It's tricky because an acquisition closing really requires, especially if it's for a business, it really requires, you know, the acquirer to have a strategic need, the acquirer to have the resources to make the acquisition happen, and it generally requires a very senior champion in the company who's willing to pound the table and convince everyone else and make the deal happen, and sort of spend the company's resources on that as opposed to building that thing or acquiring that talent some other way. And that's a lot of ifs, right? That's a lot of prerequisites for this acquisition to be possible. And none of those things have anything to do with whether it's a good time for you as a founder to sell your company or not, right? So so there's, I think, this expression that companies are not sold, they're bought, right? Like it's sort of less up to you and more up to the market as to whether your acquirers are ready. At the same time, I think building a relationship with the key people at companies that might potentially be interested in either partnering or acquiring you is probably generally a smart idea, especially if they're not direct competitors, if it's a strategic acquisition.
I'd add two other things. So Mercury has bought one company and I sold my previous company. I guess you were kind of hinting at it with like building a relationship. But I think if you go to companies and you specifically try to partner with them, which is like what this company did with Instacart, right? But I think there's like most of the time there's a model to say like, if we were working here, this is what we would build. And normally you could sell that as a partnership, right? It's like, oh, you know, just partner with us and we'll do it for you. I've seen that work quite well. And a lot of the times, like halfway through a partnership thing, if it's a big company and it's important to them, they'll kind of say, hey, why don't we just buy you? And that's like one smooth way to do it. I think the other thing that actually works is if you just have like really strong product market fit and you're growing fast, acquisitions will materialize. Most of the time, if you have really strong product market fit and you're growing fast, you should probably not sell. But yeah, when we sold my previous company, it was after 8 years and we'd finally found product market fit. And in hindsight, we should have just not sold for one more year because we grew so fast after that. But as soon as we had product market fit, we had like 4 acquirers show up. And I'd actually been trying to sell that company for 3 years. Every year I was like trying to sell it and no one was interested. And then I stopped trying to sell it and we just worked on something new that had strong product market fit. We were like, you know, had a lot of acquisition. And like at Mercury, we've had a ton of acquisition interest, even though we've never pursued it. But yeah, having product market fit will solve all problems. Although maybe that's easier said than done.
So don't spend too much time, you know, thinking about selling your company. Spend more time on product market fit, but spend a little bit of time on relationship building. You know, I think that probably is the lesson here.
By the way, like many good things could happen from building a relationship with great senior people at people in your industry. Like they could teach you something, they could be a mentor, they could introduce you to someone else who could help you. You could actually just strike a partnership that's good and doesn't have to end in M&A, or it could be a pathway to M&A.
You can invest too. And, you know,
yeah. But I think there is a danger in that, which is it could distract you from, you know, building your business better, especially early when you have fewer team members. Like if there's like 5 people on the team and 2 of them are distracted by M&A for 3 months, like a lot of your productivity for that year goes away. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time worrying about this. I'd more focus on, like you were saying, the business, customers, finding product market fit, and that's probably a higher leverage way to get acquired if that's actually your goal.
Want to pivot a little bit to now. I mean, now you're running a fund, a workshop, right? And just want to see what you're seeing out there. Like, what kind of companies are you investing in? What are you excited about? What kind of founders are you investing in?
Yeah, I mean, I've been angel investing for a long time, and now I do it a little bit more professionally. But I mean, similar to Immad, I'm still operating and trying to do all the things at the same time. And I've gone back and forth over the years in thinking about what I most value in an angel investment. Like, is it the founder? Is it the market? Is it the founder plus the market? Should I just back my friends unconditionally? Should I only back people doing something I understand? Or is it okay if I just think the founder's great, but they're in like some weird space that I don't understand? And the way I come out of it is like, founder is the number one and number two thing on the scorecard, founder and founding team. There really is no great way to make an awesome startup without a great founding team. And so I spend most of my time focused on that. And then through the lens of how the founding team thinks about the market and thinks about their product and what product they've actually built and whether or not I think they have product sense based on the output of their work, I then make the decision. But it all starts and ends with the founders and the founding team.
When you say that, like, what are you looking for in the founder? I often hear that, and I don't know what it means. Like, are you looking for like someone that went to Stanford? Like, what does that mean that like it's like the founder?
I'm going to give a hand-wavy answer because I don't think anyone, including me, has a deterministic checklist for what to look for in a founder that always works. But there are a few qualities that you look for that are necessities. And one thing to say that's also trite is startups are hard. And there's inevitably going to be really hard times and less hard times and super, super, super hard times. And so tenacity is one of the things you have to look for. You have to look for people who are so attached to the mission that they're on and have a clear understanding of what that is, that they'll persist when it inevitably gets tough.
But like, if I ask anyone in this room, I'm like, how attached are you to this mission? They'll be like, I'm fucking all in, I live for this.
Yeah.
So like, well, how are you testing it? Like,
well,
like it's just a sense you get. Like,
there's a bit of that. And there's also, I have a whole sort of scorecard that I look at reference when I'm talking to.
You have a scorecard. You just said
I have a scorecard, but it's not about checking every box, and it's not. It's not.
Well, what's on the scorecard?
Yeah, well, I can't tell you exactly what's on the scorecard. It's very proprietary. But one of the things on the scorecard is this person? It's literally written like this: is this person irrationally optimistic about what they're doing? Irrationally optimistic. Okay, so are they the biggest cheerleader of their idea? Are they like jumping up to tell me about why it's the most amazing thing? And if I don't think it's amazing, or if we disagree, can they, from first principles, just clearly explain to me why it's all going to work? Like, can they just lay out their plan in a convincing way? Believe it or not, 50% of founders can't do that.
Yeah. I personally, I focus a lot on like the market and the idea. But I feel like
if you love the idea and the market and then you don't feel great about the founder, do you invest?
I feel like I will try to get a sense of the founder from that. Like, as you say, like you'll test them and you go like, you can go like pretty deep even in like a short time period, right? You'll be like, okay, how are you going to get your first customer? And I think if you ask enough questions and you get great responses, I think that gives you a sense of the founder. But I don't know if I'm like getting a deep sense of like, is this person going to like, go to sleep at 2 a.m. thinking about their startup? Like, I feel like it's really hard to get like an amazing sense of that.
For better or worse, one thing I've noticed is that founders that have lots of things going on are less focused and less all in on their startups. So sometimes I'm asking like, do
you have any hobbies?
Yeah, like not that, but just more like, basically it's a derivative of this question of like, well, have you quit your job yet? To work on this, right? And if you haven't quit your job yet, well, then you don't believe enough. Right? Yeah. You're waiting for someone else to tell you that it's to validate your idea or the potential of it. So that, like, have they taken some sort of leap of faith or personal sacrifice to do this? Okay. And also, and one of the questions literally that I'll always ask is like, why do this? You seem smart. You could get a job at another company, or, you could join an early stage company versus start a company.
Yeah, what's a bad answer to that question?
A bad answer to that question is, I just think startups are really exciting and a lot of my friends are starting startups and I've always wanted to do it. And so now I'm doing it.
Okay. Yeah. Whereas you want them to say like, this problem is just killing me. No one else is going to solve.
You wouldn't believe I worked at Stripe, and on this billing team, we had this problem go over and over and over again, and no one's solving it. And then I looked into it, and no one's ever tried to solve it. And then I talked to this person, and I talked to 20 customers, and they all said they had the problem, and so therefore I'm doing that. Or I decided I wanted to start a company, but I then went and did a whole bunch of customer development because I want my insight to be grounded in reality. And here's what I learned, right? Versus I'm really good at technology and I'm playing with Claude Code now. And then I started a company because it seems to be easy to build software. Like, I agree. That's fun. That's a great way to do a hobby project, but not a great way to spend 10 years of your life.
Yeah. I feel like Max's way is like more of the YC way. Like, it's all about the founder, and then Immad's like more like a VC. Like, hey, let's size the market. Let's figure out like what the how the product can be.
And I've gone back and forth, and I make exceptions all the time. And you probably get a certain feeling sometimes, which makes you lean in to an investment, and I do the same thing.
This is why it's hard to raise money. You can see, like the investor.
You don't even know our own scorecards.
You don't even know. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So speaking of that, though. Okay. So what are you seeing out there in the capital markets? How is VC funding going on these days? You guys are a lot more closer to it than I am.
I mean, I would ask all the founders in the room, but it seems like a lot of great companies are getting founded, and there's a lot of investors chasing, especially AI companies. Wouldn't you agree? I think so.
I think it is like still like a. If you're a hot company and you fit the box, it can feel like boom times. I think if you're outside the box, it can feel impossible though. Especially for people that are like established a little bit before this new thing. And I think there's lots of companies out there that like a year and a half ago would have been an easy Series A, but now they're not like the hot AI company and it's very hard for them. But I think if you're in the box, this is a great time to do it.
I would agree. And there's some rationality to that. A lot of the people that work at venture firms, if that's, kind of the kind of investors we're talking about, really want to find companies that are going to grow fast and they're going to make them look like smart investors and they're going to get marked up and things like that. And so they're looking for something slightly different than what would be perfectly rational, which is just the biggest, best outcome over the long term.
I think at seed stage, there is that clip from the Silicon Valley HBO show where it's like, you have to be pre-revenue, a pure play. You know that?
I never watched that show.
You never watched that show? That show is amazing. You have to watch that show. It was airing
while Instacart was going through the same thing, and I was like, "This."
I watched it twice.
Too close to reality.
Actually, anyway, there's a bit in it where it's like this. They're starting to talk about like making some initial revenue, and this investor is like, "You got to go pure play." Anyway, it's a great bit. But I think that like slightly exists now, where if you're an AI company and you're like launched, but you're not going like 0 to 1 million in 3 months kind of thing. It's like way worse than if you are an AI company and you just don't have traction yet. Like I think pre-launch you can actually get like a hot round as an AI company, but post-launch you better be going like crazy.
I've got a framework for this, which is that there's 3 great times to raise money as a startup founder. The first great time to raise money as a startup founder is before you have any traction. It's all story, 100% story. You're a great founding team. It's a huge market opportunity. You're about to launch. You better invest now. The second great time to raise money is many months later, most likely, when you have some rocket ship trajectory, right? You're growing month over month, right? You have data to show that people love what you've built. And I used to stop there, but now I think there's a third great time to raise money, which people, I think, underappreciate, which is basically any time high quality investors are offering it to you on really fair terms on a silver platter. Like a real offer, not a let's talk, but like a real offer. And I think during times like these where that sometimes happens, right? And companies get preempted and things like that, I think it's responsible to consider taking that money and either going faster or having less risk in the business.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I talked to Apurva once about this, and you mentioned how seasonal the business is, or Instacart, right? And I think you mentioned it was like winter, you get a lot of deliveries. He's like, fundraising time, right? It's like
it's true. Yeah, there's basically people order groceries when they're at home, and when they're traveling a lot, like during the summer, they slow down, of course, because they're not in the U.S. sometimes or just not at home. And so our like Q3 numbers always look really good quarter over quarter, and I might get in trouble for saying this, but like sort of approaching our IPO, people are a little bit worried, because it's like, I don't know, we want to like go public at a time when we're going to beat our guidance that we're going to release at the same time as going public. And I was like, don't worry, it's a seasonal business, like it's gonna pick up. Just look at the patterns, right? We're gonna be fine. And we were.
There you go.
Yeah, what do you think is like the most interesting place to build an AI company right now? Like if you were talking to someone or starting from scratch, like which part of AI do you think is like got the most opportunity right now?
I think that there's a paradigm worth looking at, which is that in software engineering, we're experiencing the tip of the spear of the capabilities of AI. Meaning, if you're a software engineer, you can get Claude Code or another agentic coding tool, and you can command a fleet of agents that are coding for you, and you can manage them, and you can literally 10x your output. And it's not that complicated to learn how to do this with the tools that already exist. And I think that paradigm is going to end up applying to lots of other professions. And I think there's lots of interesting startups to be built if you believe in a world where every lawyer, every doctor, every accountant, every project manager, every product manager, every designer is also going to be orchestrating a bunch of agents to do their job 10 times faster and better. And it's fuzzy. I don't know what that world really looks like, but I do think there's a bunch of opportunity. And I think the next question is like, well, won't OpenAI and Anthropic just mop all that up? Like, aren't they going to be the platform? And of course, a lot of it will go to them. But I also think there's a bunch of startup opportunities to build sort of the vertical agentic co-pilot for every profession.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, for all of the things you mentioned, there's already vertical like AI companies. But do you feel like they're like the previous level, and now it's like, the next Harvey is going to be like lawyers with like 50 agents and like looking like Matrix or something?
And what does an AI native accountant look like?
Yeah.
What is a person who's leaving college and going into consulting or investment banking gonna want as their operating system when they land at their job, right? It's not going to be any software that was built any longer ago than 6 months ago, right? Because the techniques that make your job different are just 3 months old.
Yeah. And maybe in a year,
maybe there'll be another paradigm in here, and you have to spend a lot of your time paying attention to this and testing things yourself to stay sort of on top of it. That's one really interesting thing.
That's why it's such a fun and crazy time.
Thanks everyone for listening. Please leave us a review on whatever channel you're listening on. Makes a big difference to the algorithm and to the success of the show. And see you all next week.